The AC is rolling on yet again today, but we are back for another news flash. Hello, everyone. My name is Spenser Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We have some big news to talk about a pretty remarkable situation unfolding right now in Louisiana, where they're requiring all public school classrooms to display 10 commandments loudly and clearly within the classroom. We'll break that down for you. Also, we take a look at increasing tensions between Israel and Lebanon, where Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah spoke earlier today around 11 o'clock this morning in U.S. time, saying Israel should be afraid of an all-out war. We'll also give you some general Gaza updates and check in on a growing fight for New York's 16th district that's coming up next Tuesday, 6 days from today, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be a pretty big deal. Also, a new article in my Substack. That's right, Vantage Points, vantages.substack.com. We're going to break that down. My first article published today. Very much looking forward to it. It's going to be a good one, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We have, we got a good one for you, as always. So, we start with the latest here. Louisiana this is actually a pretty crazy situation. We have Louisiana mandating the display of the 10 commandments in schools right now. This is how it played out in the New York Times from Rick Rojas reporting from Atlanta for the New York Times on this one. Governor Jeff Landry signed in legislation into law on Wednesday requiring the display of the 10 Commandments in every public classroom in Louisiana, making the state the only one with such a mandate and reigniting the debate over how porous the boundary between church and state could be. And I think this is something that, really a lot of Americans don't understand, the other side of the country and the divide on this. I personally, living most of my life in the northeast corner of the country, I think as the Northeasterners, for the most part, do not understand how big of a deal religion plays. And this is something that is kind of cross-class, cross-race. It is so much more regional. And especially within, this kind of Christian nationalist sect that, has taken a root within the Republican Party over the last few years, not really the last few years, but for quite a while, especially with that factor playing out. We have a really, really significant constituency for them to kind of take advantage of people who just generally do, like, they're just normal Christians, some, not so normal Christians, but they are all being fired up by this constituency within the Republican Party at the moment. Critics, including to my mind, it's a really First Amendment, Congress shall make no law establishing freedom of, one religion, the precedent of one religion over another, that type of very bedrock thing. Are we allowing prayer in public schools? It's like the same type of thing like that. So legal challenges are going to be pretty intense. Freedom from Religion Foundation and the ACLU vowed a legal fight in a law that they deemed was blatantly unconstitutional, but is a battle that the proponents are prepared and in many ways eager to take on. I can't wait to be sued, Landry said on Saturday at a Republican fundraiser in Nashville, according to the Tennessean. And on Wednesday, he signed the measure, and he argued the 10 Commandments contain valuable lessons for students. He said, if you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses. It's like, again, it's almost hard for people. It's like, a lot of people in this country to take that kind of stuff seriously, but it's like this is, there are, I think, more people that, in the country than liberals would think that are looking at this stuff. They're like, it doesn't matter. But again, on its face, it is absolutely absurd because it's like you are trying to run the country. It's like you're no better than Iran. You're no better than any country that, runs its government structured around the codes of a book from thousands of years ago. Moses, whether, he exists or not, I don't even know. I don't know how well established that. I know, like, Jesus, for example, he was a real guy. But the idea that everyone's lives should be just run and argue. There's a lot of people that would be, Moses, the original lawgiver, they would kind of be like, yeah, I get that. But then when it comes to hearing that, I think this is the big difference. Hearing that from a government official, and the government official saying this is going to affect your life, you're going to have to acknowledge that Moses was a lawgiver. Your kids are going to have to know that Moses was the original lawgiver in schools. Like, it's going to be an important part of the curriculum that's taught. Like, I feel like people are just going to be like, oh, hold on, wait a second. Like, that is not going to be a very popular thing at all. The legislation is part of a broader campaign by conservative Christian groups to amplify public expressions of faith and provoke lawsuits that could reach the Supreme Court, where they expect a friendly reception than in years past. So the presumption is rooted in recent rulings, particularly one in 2002, in which the court sided with a high school football coach who argued that he had a constitutional right to pray at the 50-yard line after his team's games. The climate is certainly better, said Charles C. Haynes, a senior fellow at the Freedom Forum and a scholar with an expertise in religious liberty and civil discourse, referring to the viewpoint of those who support the legislation. Again, like, I think we see with the Midford-Pristone ruling, a couple weeks ago, where Roberts was like, okay, we went a little bit too crazy with the abortion thing, we're going to rein it in now. We want to maintain credibility with the vast majority of Americans. I think this is going to be another case where it's like, okay, you can let one guy pray, but to uphold a law that allows and mandates people to study and display the Ten Commandments. We're talking about even from elementary school, from kindergarten to public college classrooms in Louisiana. They're gonna have to display this stuff. It is absolutely absurd. And I think the big difference between that and some of these other laws is you are actually taking the Christianity, which a lot of people do deeply support and think we should have more Christian values in our society, but there is this kind of weird contrast for people who, they're a lot less comfortable saying, okay, now this is going to govern everybody's life and forcing it on everyone else. I think that is an idea in America that is a lot, very, very unpopular. It's like, okay, you can have your religion, you can have my religion, I can have my religion, let us do whatever we want with our religions and not have them kind of intersect. That is, to me, it's a very, very kind of bedrock, foundational American ideal that a lot of people are going to be very uncomfortable with messing with. Still, Haynes said that he found the enthusiasm behind the Louisiana law and other efforts unwarranted. I think they're overreaching, he added. That even this court will have a hard time justifying what lawmakers have conceived. Again, so pretty much someone who is a Freedom Forum scholar of religious liberty, essentially agreeing with me there. It is going to be an uphill battle for this law. But again, I also think this is like, this could be a gift to the Democrats because there is this level of extremism and another kind of instance for Democrats across the country to point to and say, look at this Republican Party. Like, this is what they're trying to do. This is what they want to do, or they would do if they, when they think they have the power to push anything past the Supreme Court. They're pushing the envelope. They're building the world they want to build. Do you like it? Like this is the look. You're going to have to study the Ten Commandments. Like, imagine if you're a Jewish person, Christian person, Muslim, or not Christian, but or just secular person. Like, you're a Muslim person, you're a Hindu person. Like, the people that have come to this country, contribute to this country, that happen to have different religions, their kids are going to have to be forced to essentially indoctrinated into this Christian religion forcibly, and it is a really, really crazy thing. So the measure requires the commandments be displayed in each classroom of every public elementary, middle, and high school, as well as public college classrooms. The posters must be no smaller than 11 by 14 inches, and the commandments must be the central focus of the poster in a large, easily readable font. It will include a 3-paragraph statement asserting the Ten Commandments were a prominent part of American public education for almost 3 centuries. That reflects the contention by supporters that the Ten Commandments are not purely a religious text, but also a historical document, arguing that the instructions handed down by God to Moses in the book of Exodus are a major influence on United States law. So again, this is absolutely, psychotic stuff. And it's like, you can teach people the values of Christianity without shoving Christianity as a whole down people's throats and forcing it on other people. That is a big crossing, dividing line. And I think it is a case for a lot of different people on the political level to use to point to really how crazy and extreme, and as the guy said, overreaching the Republicans are on this issue. I think, that is a very, very important thing for anyone with their salt, in opposition to the Republicans in any way to highlight. All right, we are moving to our next story now. This is with the Hassan Nasrallah. This is the chief of Hezbollah. He had a very interesting thing to say regarding Israel and the possibility of Israel standing if there was a major conflict imposed on Lebanon. He issued a pretty stern warning today in a speech saying there is no restraint and no rules and no stealings in case of a major Israeli offensive against Lebanon. This is essentially, this is the moment they've been waiting for, is what Nasrallah is saying, and we will be prepared. So, again, for those of you who don't know, Hezbollah, the force up to the north of Israel, they've kind of been making life miserable for them to a certain extent, just escalating with strikes. Exposing more of their capabilities little by little as Israel has been striking deeper and deeper into more civilian targets within Lebanon, using white phosphorus in southern Lebanon, provocation after provocation, and of course Hezbollah has slowly responded in kind, essentially serving as a little bit of a thorn on the side of the Israelis as they continue to commit their genocide in Gaza. Nasrallah's remarks on Wednesday come after soaring tensions at the Lebanon-Israeli border after Israeli officials reiterated the country is ready for an all-out war against Hezbollah. All what the enemy says are threats and warnings the mediators bring. All what the enemy says and the threats and warnings the mediators bring and what is being said in Israeli media about a war in Lebanon does not scare us, Nasrallah said in a speech via video feed. He said that Israel is the party that should be scared. So I think it's a very important kind of quote to look at, and I don't know if they kind of go on to discover it or discuss it more in the article. Say, in the warnings the mediators bring, that apparently is reference to the U.S., where Amos Hochstein, who is this White House aide, apparently showed up to Hezbollah to say, okay, listen, we know we talk about, we want to calm down tensions, we want to avoid a regional war. Hezbollah, if Israel decides to attack you, we're going to back them up. And Hezbollah is essentially saying, okay, well, bring it on. Israeli Foreign Minister Israeli Katz on Tuesday raised the prospect of a major conflict with the Lebanese group after Hezbollah released drone surveillance showing major infrastructure and military sites we talked about yesterday in northern Israel. On Wednesday, Nasrallah underscored Hezbollah's military capabilities, saying the group has acquired new weapons and abundance of drones that it manufactures locally. The enemy knows well that we prepared ourselves for the most difficult days, he said. The enemy knows well what awaits it and why it has been deterred so far. And it knows there will be no place in the country that would be spared from our rockets and drones, and it won't be indiscriminate bombing. Every rocket has a target. Nasrallah also suggested that Hezbollah may send ground forces into Israeli territory. There's a lot of fear from the enemy that the resistance would invade northern Israel. There's a standing possibility that remains present in the context of any war imposed on Lebanon. The Iran-aligned Lebanese organization started attacking military bases in northern Israel on the day after the outbreak of the war in Gaza on October 7th, and what it says was a support front to back Palestinian armed groups. Nasrallah stressed that the Lebanese front is making a difference in the broader confrontation against Israel and drawing Israeli military resources away from Gaza, and almost, to a certain extent, playing. It's kind of weird because they are playing into Israel's hands by continuing to work, and they really have no choice because Israel keeps provoking them time and time again. And because they want this war, so they are kind of getting what they want. But I think it is a very, very stupid thing to wish for a war with Hezbollah at this point. If you are Israel, judging on how the war on Hamas is going and the capabilities of Hezbollah, just to say the least, any sort of all-out war with the full unleashing of military capabilities is going to be pretty disastrous for both sides. And no reason to pretend, it's going to be incredibly disastrous for Lebanon. Millions of civilians could die if something very serious, or not millions, but hopefully not millions, but a very large portion of civilians could pass away if this were to really escalate in such a way. Let's hear a little bit of what Nasrallah said, and I'm pretty sure I will just be reading over the titles here.
Now,
so this is actually,
additional plans.
All right, I don't think that's the video that we thought it was. Apologize for that. But anyway, Nasrallah added that Israel plans to use airports and bases in Cyprus for military purposes if its military infrastructure is attacked during a major war. Opening Cypriot airports and bases for the Israeli enemy to target Lebanon means the Cypriot government has become part of the war, and the resistance will deal with it as a part of the war, he said without elaborating. Nasrallah also warned that the group would open a naval front against Israel in the Mediterranean. He added that Hezbollah will continue its attacks against Israeli targets, saying that the solution to the crisis is clear which is ending the Israeli war on Gaza. So, bottom line there from this speech, he is kind of pounding his chest a little bit, saying, we know that you guys want to attack us, and that is something that you kind of, it's meaning Israel, that you have kind of consistently signaled to us over the last couple of months, really just first in the rhetoric, but then kind of in the military positioning of the Israeli army. So it is something that they are pretty proud to be doing. We saw some of the rhetoric from the quote I read from Israeli Katz, who's the foreign minister, defense minister, Yoav Gallant, also promising similar kind of retaliation and a just general kind of military positioning, more military resources going to the north, and continued aggression, continued strikes on Lebanon, targeting civilians that really have been underappreciated there, have kind of forced Hezbollah with this video yesterday of these kind of key drone targets that essentially went undetected by the Iron Dome. And now this speech today from Hezbollah, they're showing that they are prepared to respond to the threats. The other kind of interesting part that kind of remains unresolved is what will the U.S. do? What are they really doing behind the scenes? It seems very likely, knowing the U.S., that they have essentially promised that they're going to come in and threaten Hezbollah, that they're going to come in and back Israel if there's any kind of offensive here. But the context of how the offensive gets launched and then what the U.S. does to respond to it and the levels that they take to respond to it are going to be very, very, very interesting to keep an eye on, both for the U.S.-Israel relationship and the kind of standing of Israel if things really get harsh, because they could get really demolished by Hezbollah if they turn up the heat, or put under a lot of pressure if they turn up the heat. Hezbollah turns up the heat on the Israeli regime. All right, so we do have more general Gaza updates to give you. Israeli tanks and drones pushed into Rafah's western neighborhoods today as an attack on people waiting for aid trucks killed at least 9 Palestinians and injured 30 near the Karem Abu Salem border crossing in Rafah or southern Gaza. The UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, estimates that just about 65,000 people remain in Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians had been seeking shelter before fleeing the Israeli military's advance on the southern city. A UN commission reports that Israeli authorities have been responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity. At least, and this is a hefty at least, 37,396 people have been killed and 85,523 injured in Israel's war on Gaza since October 7th. The revised death toll in Israel from the mosque-led attacks stands at 1,139, with dozens of people still held captive in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Cypriot president just minutes ago responded to Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah's warning the country could become part of a war that, should Israel clashes with Lebanon, lead to an all-out war. Government spokesperson Konstantinos Letimbiotis, apologize for the butchered pronunciation there, shared a statement on social media from Cyprus' President Nikos Christodoulidis, in which the Cypriot leader said the Republic of Cyprus is not involved in war conflicts in any way. Letimbiotis said that the president had described Hezbollah's leaders' warning to Cyprus as not pleasant, but they do not correspond in any case whatsoever to what is attempted. That is to present an image that Cyprus is involved in war activities. That is not the case whatsoever. The spokesperson quoted the president as saying, so, Cyprus, pretty much an island nation, the tax haven, that has been pretty susceptible to international intervention. The U.S. said that they were going to try and launch aid from there, but then Israel essentially turned them down. So they have been involved in some aid efforts as kind of a launching off point, but I think it would be a big step up for Israel to get open access to Cypriot ports if things were really to go south in the Lebanese situation. Israelis say that living on the border with Lebanon is becoming unbearable amid the clashes. It is scary, according to Uri Vazan, a resident of Kiryat Shemona, to the AP, that's the most northern city in Israel. You don't know when it's coming to you. Suddenly you have an alarm. Suddenly missiles fall, he said in Kiryat Shemona, which was targeted by 15 rockets on Wednesday. To be here is not easy. It's scary, unbearable. It can't be contained. Another resident, Shishi Fima, told the AP. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has detailed how Israel prevents humanitarian assistance from reaching Palestinians in Gaza and the occupied West Bank in a new report. Here are some of the ways that the UN chief has said that this is going on, including some of the physical obstacles, including Israeli barriers, checkpoints, roadblocks, and gates, restrictions on goods, restricting the entry of all imports, including food and fuel, into Gaza, restrictions on humanitarian workers. With international UN staff have had difficulties obtaining work visas. Palestinian UN staff have been denied entry to occupied East Jerusalem to get their jobs. Administrative barriers such as Israel's building permit regime have also been a key source of stopping aid from reaching Palestinians. Interesting report in PDF form on the UN website to check out if you are so inclined. All right, so with that being said, we're going to go now to our next story. And that is with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Jamaal Bowman. They are really, the battle for the New York 16th district is definitely heating up. AOC was in a little bit of an exchange with the AIPAC, reacting to the news that because of AIPAC spending through their subsequent PACs and their bundlers and all that, she has tweeted. Responded to the tweet that the New York 16th primary, has seen over $23 million in spending and reservations, making it the most expensive House primary ever. An unspoken secret in Congress, she says, is that much of the reflexive, blind, unconditional vote support from nearly any Israeli government action isn't from actual agreement, it's from fear. Representatives are terrified of this, of AIPAC, so they don't vote their conscience, they vote fear. And of that 23 million, of spending, 14 million of that has come from United Democracy Project, which is AIPAC. Then the rest was spent directly by George Latimer, 2.54 million. 2.1 million has been spent by Fair Shake, which is another, so that's already, I think it's like 18 million right there. Out of 23 million, and the rest, kind of 5 million, has been spent roughly by pro Jamaal Bowman outfits like Jamaal Bowman himself, Justice Democrats, Working Families Party, but 2.54 million and 2.14 million coming from George Latimer and Fair Shake, as well as 14 million from the United Democracy Project. Huge amount of ads. I have multiple friends. Believe it or not, I do have friends. It's hopefully I give off that impression if you're listening to this podcast. For a long period of time. But I do have a lot of friends, including many of the people who were on the podcast before, who live in that district. So they are, getting bombarded right now by Latimer stuff, whether it be postcards, ads on TV. It's a big deal. And AOC is absolutely right. Like, you are seeing right now the platonic ideal of why people don't spend against AIPAC. And it has been, or why people don't criticize Israel, because of this really titanic wave of spending that AIPAC has unleashed on them. And it's been a really clear and kind of disturbing sight to see that democracy has been so easily influenced by this big money. And, it is legitimately looking like a pretty uphill battle for Jamaal Bowman down the road. AIPAC actually responded to this. They say, no, AOC, the overwhelming majority of Congress votes with their constituents who support the American-Israeli relationship. Americans want a strong alliance with a democratic ally. This partnership saves lives, strengthens our troops, grows our economy, and advances U.S. interests and values. And again, are they talking about American economy or are they talking about Israeli economy? Because at this point, I don't know. And she responded with a long tweet, but she says, essentially, if AIPAC positions are so popular, they'd be free. Instead, they are bought. Could not have said that better myself. So here is how Chris Hayes responds to it. So
there are 6 days to go until Election Day in New York, and we already have the most expensive congressional primary in American history. It's happening in the 16th District, where Representative Jamaal Bowman faces a challenge from a fellow Democrat, Westchester County Executive George Latimer. More than $22 million have been poured into this race. Again, there's a primary between two Democrats in a D+20 district. Why all that spending? Where is it coming from? Well, this race isn't really about the candidates, at least the spending part of it. It's more about the shape of politics in the post-Citizens United era. Just take a look at this bar chart here. Here are the 5 top spenders in New York 16, according to the data firm Ad Impact. Both the candidates are there, as well as some groups you would expect in a liberal Democratic primary. The vast majority of all the ad spending in this primary, $14 million, is coming from over there on the left from a single super PAC called the United Democracy Project, or UDP. They are the sole reason this is the most expensive primary ever in American history.
Good to see that getting some mainstream coverage there in on MSNBC. All right, so to our last story today. This is actually in Vantage Points, Vantages.substack.com. Go check it out, give it a read. I wrote it today. It is my brand new Substack, trying to get more in-depth, more broader analysis. So I just want to highlight this. Go, again, check it out. It's on my Twitter. It's, again, advantages.substack.com. Support for some kind of exclusive post coming soon. If you like Newsflash, but more thought out, more analytical, more kind of argumentative, like proving a point on a broader topic, you will love Vantage Points. So go to vantages.substack.com to go subscribe to that. But it's essentially all about a lot of what we talked about yesterday. This is my first piece here for Vantage Points. Again, vantages.substack.com. Go check it out. Go subscribe today. And if you feel like it, pledge $5 a month for some exclusive articles. But it's all essentially about Biden's wild ride to mass deportation, with the announcement of an executive order this past Tuesday easing the pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrant spouses of legal migrants. President Joe Biden marked yet another twist in his wild journey on immigration since he began his campaign for president in 2019. Lurching from hardliner to relatively conciliatory in a seemingly transparent attempt to win votes, it remains to be seen if Biden's big switch, then second switch, on immigration will be at all effective in November. In this piece, we essentially take a look at, or I essentially take a look at the evolution of Biden's border policy since 2019, and it really is quite a trip. So it starts in the Title 42 era, where essentially he goes full liberal. This is a quote from the beginning of his administration. We're going to work to undo the moral and national shame of the previous administration that literally, not figuratively, ripped children from the arms of their families, their mothers, and their fathers at the border, with no plan to reunify the children who are still in custody and their parents. That was Biden early in his administration. During the campaign, essentially fit with the rhetoric he was saying in the campaign, when liberals were really horrified with the kids in cages rhetoric and policy of the immigration policy of the Trump administration, Stephen Miller, all that horridness. During the campaign, he pledged to welcome 2 million asylum seekers in a heartbeat. He was also critical of Trump's use of Title 42, which is the policy, the COVID-era policy, to force asylum seekers to apply from Mexico for health reasons. And he called a whole press release calling Trump's regime of restrictions cruel just days before the election. But despite, kind of in the rise of increasing right-wing pressure on the border from essentially the moment he got into office, he was unable or unwilling to get rid of Title 42 and move past it. And these continued, is he going to extend? Is it going to stay? Is it going to go? It could be free. We could have easier access to cross the border. It kind of created a weird feedback loop. It helped smugglers encourage migrants to make the dangerous crossing, which in turn bred the same right-wing attacks on Biden's handling of the border that caused him to continuously waver on moving past Title 42. But by May 2023, the COVID federal emergency ended, so Title 42 had to end. The stops did kind of spike up in the wake of Title 42, but they then did kind of decline. and which was a little bit of a problem. But, again, they did stabilize significantly by March of 2024 as the harsher measures took hold that Biden put in place of Title 42, which were, again, harsher measures than before. And Biden negotiated an informal deal with Mexican President López Obrador to mitigate migrant flow. However, he went full hardliner from there with this bill that flooded money, this bipartisan border deal that flooded money to ICE and the CBP and shut down the border after 5,000 and the asylum process after 5,000 encounters. That was essentially, chewed up and spit out by the hard right immigration regime. And Biden, killed his hopes for an immigration grand bargain. The GOP showed clearly that any efforts to win over voters whose top issue is immigration would be stymied at every turn by a GOP political media apparatus that had already vividly painted Biden as responsible for a metastasizing migrant crisis. So Biden said, fine, I'll do it myself, Thanos style. Instead of abandoning a hopeless effort to win over immigration voters, he essentially countered Mike Johnson's arguments at the time of the bipartisan border bill that he should, quote, sign an order right now to end the mass release of illegals and dangerous persons in our country by signing an executive order a few months after the bill's failure that accomplished many of the same priorities the failed bill did. In early June, Biden announced an executive order that would shut down the border and asylum process if 2,500 encounters were reported by Border Patrol, which is, again, half as much as the failed bill. This ensured the border would be shut down the moment the bill became law. Even that was, blasted by Republicans. Tim Scott called it a Band-Aid. Trump said Biden was pretending to do something on the border. And this is probably one of my favorite paragraphs in this whole piece. With the voters, Biden received little credit for his harsher handling of the migrant crisis. Voters' disapproval of his handling of immigration rose by 6% after the failed bipartisan bill, 5% in between the bill and the executive order, and 5% more after the order was released on June the 4th in a poll taken from June 9th to the 11th. Now we have arrived at the policy from yesterday, where Biden completed the final coup de grace of his wild immigration policy journey. An executive order that gives lawful permanent residence to undocumented spouses and children of U.S. citizens without making them leave the country, providing deportation protection to an estimated 500,000 families and 50,000 children. Morally, again, as we talked about yesterday, this is the right move, but politically, it reaches a desperate U-turn to win back young, diverse voters that have wavered on Biden due to Gaza and his previous immigration policy. It's hard to interpret the logic here, because has Biden, gone over and given up on kind of winning the hardliners? We don't know. But the bottom line here is Biden's failure to fight for immigration reform that equitably increases pathways to citizenship for the vast majority of hardworking migrants and can, quote, let in 2 million asylum seekers in a heartbeat, unquote, as he claimed to want to do in 2019, has legitimized the worst right-wing narratives about immigration to more people, mainly left independents and Democrats, than ever before. And this, in turn, has served to build a platform for future anti-immigrant brutality that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller, could only dream of. All right. So with that being said, essentially how I conclude that, highly encourage you to go check it out. Vantages.substack.com. The title is Biden's Wild Ride to Mass Deportation. And if you like it, subscribe. If you really like it, pledge, $5 a month for some extra special articles. And that's all we got for Newsflash. We'll see you on Friday.